So I was not planning to make this video, but things have changed with my experience on the 14 Pro Max. iOS 16 has been a train wreck, especially as of late, and so yes, I'm gonna share my experience with you guys. So my journey with the 14 Pro Max has been a roller coaster because initially I faced battery issues. The battery was draining like crazy for no reason, even with the always on display off, and that made no sense because internally at least, this had a very similar battery to the 13 Pro Max, which was a battery champ. I had no issues with the battery life on that device, but for some reason, on iOS 16 with the 14 Pro Max, it was pretty bad. And I was actually contemplating returning the device, but thankfully around iOS 16.1 things got a lot better software-wise, the bugs were much less, but more importantly the battery life was now as good as the 13 Pro Max, and things were very great. In fact, I made a 2 months later review on the 14 Pro Max, and I was mostly positive about the device, so yes, I thought that was the end of all the software issues, and everything was gonna be perfect. But unfortunately, that was not the case because with iOS 16.2 and now iOS 16.3, there's been issues upon issues, and it's been a very frustrating experience. So I have three main issues with the device on iOS 16.3. The first thing is, of course, battery life. Those issues I had at launch are back now, and it's got to a point where I'm continually using low power modes throughout the day to make this last, and that's pretty awful because I got this very expensive iPhone for the battery life and the fact it should easily last me through the day without me managing the device. And that was not the case with the 13 Pro Max. That device I did not manage at all, but it lasted throughout the day. But with this phone, for some reason, it keeps having battery drain issues, and I'm having to use low power modes. And let me remind you guys, I'm not using the always on display on this. I've turned that off. I turned it off months ago because I've realized that is a massive battery drain. So yes, even with that disabled, battery life is subpar on the 14 Pro Max. So my second issue is even worse, and that's the performance, because I've actually been experiencing lag and stuttering with the 14 Pro Max, and that again you don't expect from a very expensive iPhone, and actually any recent iPhone. And yeah, honestly, I can't remember the last time I experienced lag consistently on the iPhone, but that's been the case with iOS 16 on the 14 Pro Max. Now, if it happened once or twice, that would be fine, but this happens pretty often, especially when using low power modes. Now, yes, I'm aware low power mode does restrict the CPU on the device, and it also makes the display 60Hz, but that should not cause the device to stutter because the A16 is already a very powerful chip, and so limiting that should not cause the device to lag. And 60Hz I'm actually fine with. I have many 60Hz devices. That's not the reason I've been experiencing stuttering issues. It's the actual software that's letting the hardware down. And so yes, it's a bummer I have to experience this with the 14 Pro Max. Now the third issue I've been experiencing is the phone rebooting and the phone refusing to turn on when it's on standby. So yeah, these are pretty random issues, but basically when I'm casually using the device, not pushing it, just using it for daily casual use, the phone reboots, I see a spinning wheel for a minute, and then the device goes back to normal. But why is that happening in the first place? Why should an expensive device with a high-end chip be rebooting on a regular basis? It makes no sense. I've not experienced this with other iPhones. Now, if that happened once, I would not be pissed, but this has happened 3 or 4 times in the last few weeks, and it's really odd. So yes, it's iOS 16 to blame for this, and Apple should fix that. But that's not all, because when I wake up in the morning and I pick up my phone for the first time in the day, the phone sometimes refuses to wake up. I press all the buttons, I tap the screen but nothing, and then after a few minutes, the phone realizes that, hey, yes, I should wake up, and the screen turns on. But again, why is that happening? And again, like the rebooting, this has happened more than once. It's very odd. And again, iOS 16.3 and 16.2 is to blame. I've had all these issues on both these versions of iOS 16. And just as I finished recording this video, we have a new bug. This time I had some lag issues with the camera and I could not even see the footage in the viewfinder, which was pretty odd. Now, of course, so far this has only happened once, but ideally this should never be the case. So yeah, this is yet another reason why I'm disappointed. So those are the issues I've been experiencing, and it's quite frustrating because the reason I switched from Android to iPhone a few years ago was because I found iOS to be way more fluid and stable, and yes, it was the boring OS compared to Android, but it was reliable, which is what I cared about, and so that's why I've been using iPhones for years. And yes, I know we've had bad iOS versions in the past, like iOS 13, even iOS 15 at the beginning was a little rough, but I'll be honest guys, I did not have major issues. Those were actually still pretty stable for the most part. iOS 16 though has been pretty bad and consistently bad and has ruined my experience with this phone, and it's got so bad that I think the 14 Pro Max is the worst iPhone I've ever owned. And that's not great because the hardware in this is incredible but the software lets it down, and so I'm praying that iOS 17 focuses on reliability first. We don't need fancy new features. We should have another iOS 12 year where the focus is on performance and stability of the OS. We really need that, and I'm hoping that does fix my experience with the 14 Pro Max. But hey, it would be nice if Apple could even fix that with a future version of iOS 16, because I should not have to put up with issues and software bugs on a very expensive device. It should be a stable experience. And so yes, I'm hoping that Apple in the next few weeks does fix these bugs. And yeah, things have got so frustrating with this that I'm using this guy, the S20 FE, which is a phone from 2020, I believe. It was not a flagship, it was a mid-range device, but right now, stability-wise, this phone is way more smooth and way more reliable. So yes, I actually use this alongside the iPhone, but hopefully Apple can fix the battery life and the bugs I've been facing pretty soon. Anyways, let's delve into your questions. So Mike says, I would typically purchase an iPhone Pro model, but if next year's Pro Max / Ultra model gets the periscope zoom lens and the titanium finish, I may consider going for the larger model, especially if it weighs just as much or less than the regular Pro model. And this is exactly what Apple wants. They're going to upsell consumers to the Ultra with the exclusive features, and that's going to increase Apple's average selling price for iPhones. And so yes, I'm sure many people are going to do the same and go for the Ultra instead when they usually get the regular Pro. And I think the titanium chassis is going to be the big upgrade that's going to sway regular Pro consumers, because I know many have complained about the weight of the Pro Max, and so if Apple can drastically reduce that, I think most regular Pro users will put up with the bigger size for the additional features. So those are my thoughts, but tell me in the comments guys, how has your iOS 16 experience been? Has it been good? Has it been bad? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you for watching guys, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumours, and on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one.